Breaking news this Thursday night, binding arbitration. Ottawa's orders for Canada's railway dispute after talks derail.
Nothing's moving anywhere in Canada.
The lockout's consequences for commuters, consumers, and the economy. Tonight's the night Kamala Harris takes center stage, set to become the Democrats' presidential nominee.
Let us choose common sense over nonsense.
The expectations and challenges ahead. Qualifications without verification. Why a federal program meant to benefit Indigenous businesses is under scrutiny. And a slugger slides into retirement. Joey Votto calls it a career. Global News sits down with the Canadian baseball great.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news tonight on Canada's unprecedented railway shutdown. After rejecting earlier calls to step in, the federal government is now ordering Canada's railways and the union to binding arbitration. The move caps off a tumultuous day that saw Canada's two biggest railways lock out employees simultaneously for the first time. At 12:01 Eastern Time this morning, Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Kansas City locked out 9,300 unionized workers. The two rail networks make up more than 75% of Canadian tracks, a lifeline that delivers crucial supplies across major industries, including agriculture, mining, retail, construction, along with thousands of commuters. Altogether, more than $1 billion worth of goods each day. And tonight, the union says workers will remain on picket lines while it reviews Ottawa's decision. Our breaking news coverage begins with Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, where Canada's Labour Minister announced the government's intervention. So, Mac, what does this mean for the labour action?
Jeff, less than 24 hours after the lockout started, the federal government is attempting to put an end to it, ordering CN, CP, and the union into binding arbitration.
I'm using my authorities under the Canada Labour Code to secure industrial peace and deliver the short and long-term solutions that are in the national interest.
The Liberals directing all sides back to work, but Labour Minister Steve McKinnon couldn't confirm when the trains would run again, instead hoping it would be in days.
I'm ordering the three things: resumption of activities, binding arbitration process, and extending the collective agreement.
The railways asked McKinnon for binding arbitration last week, but he rejected it, instead wanting to see how the process played out.
We wanted to give it every chance of success, every chance to succeed. Unfortunately, in this case, we weren't able to.
The union and the companies still not close on numerous issues.
That's kind of been CN's and CPKC's strategy to try to force the government to intervene.
A process the Liberals' political partners do not support.
We want to make it very clear. We're not going to accept any interference, whether that's forcing arbitration, whether that's forcing back to work. None of that is allowed on our watch. We're going to fight and oppose that.
What do we want?
Fair negotiations!
Over 9,000 workers were locked out at 12:01 Eastern Thursday morning.
I think what the railway is trying to do is create a crisis. We did not go on strike. We were locked out.
A crisis that could have led to substantial economic losses, estimated at $341 million a day. At BC's pulp and paper mills that couldn't move their goods, temporary layoffs could have started in as little as 2 days.
Canada's a trading nation, and we need our supply chain to be there for us. And confidence is shaken in that right now.
Economic concerns also worrying the Americans. Ambassador David Cohen saying the U.S. expressed concerns about the effect of a rail work stoppage on the billions in Canada-U.S. trade moved by rail. The U.S. Labour and Transportation Secretary is also speaking with their Canadian counterparts about the rail lockout.
So, Mac, walk us through the next steps. What happens now?
Yeah, Jeff, so what McKinnon has done is send things to the Labour Relations Board, so it's essentially out of his hands now. And normally in these circumstances, that's it. That's the end to a lockout or a strike. But we saw recently with the WestJet strike that binding arbitration was ordered, yet the mechanics walked out anyways due to a ruling from the board, and that could potentially happen here. Plus, there is also the possibility that the Teamsters challenge this in court. So it's not 100% that it is a done deal with the labor issues. Now, CP is waiting on the Labour Relations Board to make a decision on their lockout, but CN has announced that they have ended their lockout as of 6 p.m. Eastern and are restarting business. And just from today's stoppages alone, Jeff, CN estimates that it could take up to 5 additional days of work to deliver the goods that are already piling up.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. And as Mac mentioned, even a short-lived shutdown is hitting millions of Canadians hard. Heather Yourex-West looks at the immediate impacts for workers, consumers, and commuters.
It's like, I got to get to work.
It was a morning scramble in cities reliant on rail service on the first day of the CN and CPKC lockout.
There's no easy way to replace a train, so we're doing our best.
But with 3 rail lines no longer operating, Montreal's transit service was left to find another way to get 20,000 people where they needed to go. The transport of everything across the country now off track.
It's going to hurt us a lot.
Grocers like Calgary's Bridgeland Market had been bracing for impact as shipping routes changed from train to truck.
Where the big box stores, they have their own supply chain networks, where they have their own trucking and stuff, they're not affected as much as we are. But for the smaller independents, it's going to be rough.
Major retailers likely have a bit of breathing room, having had time and resources to prepare. But experts warn if things can't get back to normal within 5 to 7 days, consumers may start to notice emptier shelves or higher prices at big box stores too.
As soon as you transfer from rails to wheels, you are increasing the cost to transport goods. Sometimes it's double the price, sometimes it's triple the price.
Which could put Canada's food inflation rate back on the rise.
One train is worth over 300 trucks. They've estimated the average manufacturer will cost them about $275,000 per day.
And that's because without rail, Canada loses most of its capacity to import and export. Even with a quick resolution, it will take time to bring things back online. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
And from trains to planes, there's even more labor trouble on the horizon. Air Canada pilots voted overwhelmingly to approve a strike mandate. Now, negotiations are ongoing. The union is pushing for better wages and retirement benefits. But if a deal is not reached, those pilots could walk off the job as early as September 17th. Turning to other news now, the RCMP have arrested a Toronto resident on terror charges after a lengthy national security investigation. The Mounties say the FBI provided them information in 2021 that led to the suspect's arrest. Police are not identifying the accused because the alleged offenses took place when the suspect was a minor. The charges involve creating and distributing terrorist propaganda online. The accused is set to appear in court by video link next Tuesday. The Italian Coast Guard has found the body of another passenger after that super yacht sank off Sicily on Monday. The remains of British tech magnate Mike Lynch were recovered from the wreckage. One woman is still missing, and that's believed to be Lynch's 18-year-old daughter. 15 of the 22 people on board survived, escaping in a lifeboat during a sudden and severe storm. In the U.S., the Democrats' vice presidential nominee was in the spotlight last night at the party's national convention. Tim Walz gave an impassioned speech and an emotional tribute to his family.
Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you.
Walz described the challenges that he and his wife faced in starting a family through fertility treatments. That prompted the tearful reaction from his son, Gus, who stole the show, mouthing the words, "That's my dad." The 17-year-old has a nonverbal learning disorder. And tonight is the main event. The spotlight shifts to Kamala Harris as she formally accepts the presidential nomination and brings the convention to a close. Our Jackson Proskow joins us now from Chicago. So, Jackson, what more can we expect?
Well, Jeff, we've just received excerpts of Harris's acceptance speech. In it, she leans heavily into her own biography. She talks about the unexpected position she found herself in, but that her whole life has been about unexpected positions. And she describes the election as a chance to chart a new way forward, not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. She also describes Donald Trump as an unserious man, but a serious threat to the country, building on all of these themes as she assumes the helm of the Democratic Party.
There's no question she has unified her party. Tonight, Kamala Harris will introduce herself to the nation as a presidential nominee, outlining her vision with a nod to her historic candidacy.
I hope we're going to get some stories to think about our family. I hope that people see that we have an opportunity to elect someone that is going to be ready on day one to be president.
Harris has single-handedly renewed the party and perhaps changed its fortunes in November's election. A significant part of her speech will focus on praising President Joe Biden and his legacy, 1 month and 1 day after he dropped out of the race and endorsed her.
There's no way that Kamala Harris can win without talking about the successes of this administration. I think it's essential that we run on his record and her record in order to get us to victory.
Harris faces one big problem. Her late entry into the race means she's still relatively unknown to many Americans. Now comes tremendous pressure to outline where she stands on the issues, including U.S. support for Israel and the conflict in Gaza. Outside the convention hall, a group of uncommitted delegates is holding a sit-in, protesting the DNC's refusal to give speaking time to a Palestinian-American voice at the convention, the day after the family of an American hostage took the stage.
Needing our only son and all of the cherished hostages home is not a political issue.
Maybe we can't change foreign policy overnight, but we can start with some small things to humanize Palestinians, and that is getting a speaker in there.
Lots of talk about who's not speaking here. Also, lots of speculation about who will be making a surprise appearance here this evening. One of the biggest names in entertainment, rumored to be taking the stage later on tonight as the Democrats try to capitalize on this massive convention. We should point out, Jeff, that Kamala Harris has raised more money in the last 10 days than Joe Biden did in the previous 15 months.
All right, thanks, Jackson. And the race to the White House could carry major consequences for funding for Ukraine, where today President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the northeastern region of Sumy. It's his first trip to the border area since Ukraine's surprise offensive into Russian territory. Zelensky says his forces have claimed control of another settlement in the Russian region of Kursk, but Ukraine also continues to lose ground in its own eastern Donetsk region. Breaking her silence, coming up, what superstar Taylor Swift had to say about the terror plot targeting her shows. That's Coldplay frontman Chris Martin and American singer Maggie Rogers paying tribute to Swifties, serenading fans last night with a cover of one of Taylor Swift's most popular songs. The British band performed in the same stadium in Vienna, Austria, where Swift's concerts were canceled earlier this month after a foiled terror plot. And for the first time, Swift is also speaking out about that planned attack targeting her shows. On social media, she wrote, "The situation filled her with a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt. But she expressed her gratitude that we were grieving concerts and not lives." Swift also explained her public silence about the incident was to ensure her fans' safety until her European tour wrapped. She wrote, "In cases like this one, silence is actually showing restraint and waiting to express yourself at a time when it's right to." And take a look at this gigantic gem. It is believed to be the second largest rough diamond ever found, and it was discovered intact at a Canadian-owned mine in Botswana. It's more than 2,400 carats. The stone's quality and value are now being assessed. Roads have been turned into rivers in parts of Bangladesh where relentless monsoon rain triggered heavy flooding. At least 11 people have been killed. Millions of others are stranded. Some have had to be rescued by rope. And with more rain in the forecast, officials are warning that water levels could rise even further. Procurement strategy under scrutiny. Still ahead, the questions surrounding a federal program intended to help Indigenous businesses. A federal program is coming under fire over loopholes that appear to allow it to be exploited at the expense of Indigenous companies. The federal government spends at least $33 billion a year on contracts for goods and services, and 5% go to Indigenous-owned businesses, touted as a form of reconciliation. But a Global News investigation with researchers from the First Nations University of Canada found that program, which helps Indigenous companies make more than $1 billion annually, hasn't always required bidders to prove they're actually First Nations, Inuit, or Métis. Melissa Ridgen reports.
This is our 3-ply mask machine. It can produce 70 masks a minute.
La Flèche is a manufacturing plant on Kahnawake Mohawk territory in Quebec.
making products for medical, aerospace, and defense sectors. Players in Canada's lucrative procurement industry, one of more than 2,800 companies on the government's Indigenous Business Directory. But they question whether some on the directory are actually Indigenous.
It's absolutely commonly known from us, the Indigenous, that there are people out there who are not Indigenous that have these businesses claiming they're Indigenous.
A federal spokesman told Global News the procurement strategy for Indigenous business largely operated on the honor system for 25 years, and they only started attempting to verify Indigenous claims back in 2022, when the Trudeau government ramped up spending. Government records show contracts awarded under the Indigenous procurement program skyrocketed from $100 million in 2018 to $1.6 billion for the 2022-23 fiscal year. Companies Global News contacted insist they're in compliance with the government's rules, but lack of monitoring has Indigenous leaders wondering how many businesses aren't.
If the door is so wide open, that means so is the opportunity for so many more to come. We'll then go after all the procurement opportunities that will exist there.
Literally, we've had no question asked. We filled out paper, send a corporate registration, which anybody can get online, and that's it. There's no question asked.
And Ottawa hasn't fixed other loopholes, like what's known in the business as renting a feather. That sees non-Indigenous companies pay a First Nations, Inuit, or Métis person to act as their majority owner. Some Indigenous leaders believe the government is more interested in appearing to do business with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis than making sure they actually are.
Inuit leader Natan Obed says buying billions in supplies and services from Indigenous contractors is a noble idea if properly managed.
But not if we are in the field with questionable businesses of Indigenous affiliation or straight out fraudulent Indigenous businesses.
This expert says Ottawa should do more.
My advice would be go and visit them, visit the factory, or visit the people, meet the board of directors, meet the leadership, get independent confirmation of the certification.
La Flèche would welcome that sort of diligence.
Not only as Indigenous business owners do we lose out, but communities as a whole lose out. If we think about all the business that is lost in the community here of Kahnawake and all the opportunity that the community is losing itself, it's very profound, and it's hard to put a value on that.
Their hope is that increased scrutiny will force Ottawa to close the loopholes so entrepreneurs like them can get on with business, growing the Indigenous economy. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
There's an alarming report about the life expectancy of First Nations people in British Columbia. The First Nations Health Authority says between 2017 and 2021, life expectancy of Indigenous people in BC dropped dramatically by 6 years. The Health Services Chief Officer says the drop was mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and BC's opioid crisis. The stats follow a troubling trend seen in other provinces. Just last year, a report found the lifespan of First Nations people in Alberta also decreased by 7 years between 2015 and 2021. He was Votto-matic at the plate. Up next, we look back at Joey Votto's legendary baseball career.
That's it. I'm done. I am officially retired from baseball.
That is Toronto's Joey Votto in a parking lot outside Buffalo's Salin Field. His sudden but not unexpected retirement closes the book on a remarkable baseball career. Votto spent the past 6 months trying to make it back to the big leagues and had hoped to suit up with his hometown team, the Blue Jays. He gave it his all through to the very last pitch, but it didn't work out. Our Eric Sorensen recently sat down with the superstar slugger in Buffalo during Votto's final days with the farm team.
Just days ago, Joey Votto was working hard in minor league Buffalo, still optimistic he would play Major League Baseball again, only now with his hometown Toronto Blue Jays.
I feel confident as long as I have health on my side, I'm going to perform well.
We sat down with Votto to talk about his career and his love of the game.
It's always been just a passion.
In his first preseason game with his new team, Votto homered, then hurt his ankle badly. After months, the ankle was finally coming around, and he was getting the chance to play, first with Buffalo. Alas, he was striking out more than he was hitting, and at 40, he could see a comeback wasn't in the cards. He posted a thank you to his family, teammates, and others, saying, "Toronto and Canada, I wanted to play in front of you. I tried with all my heart to play for my people. I'm just not good anymore." It's sad for the Blue Jays, too.
What a unique player, wonderful person. He's one of the best for the last 20 years.
Joey Votto, 6'2".
He was a rarity, a hot prospect who was Canadian, a teenager drafted by Cincinnati. His career, like his home runs, would soar. A league MVP, a six-time All-Star. At one point, he signed a $250 million contract.
One of the best around. Could that make Votto a Hall of Famer? Only 2 Canadian baseball players have ever been inducted, pitcher Ferguson Jenkins and outfielder Larry Walker. Joey Votto could be the third. His career statistics, a little behind Walker's batting average, but in hits, homers, on-base percentage, all pretty comparable.
A former teammate says it was an honor to play with him.
He's an all-time great, and I grew up watching him. I was in high school, and here we are. I got to be a teammate with him.
Do you think in terms of your legacy?
No, I would like to do my job well and move on.
And he said he'll have no regrets.
And if it breaks my heart, or if I fall flat on my face, that's okay. I did everything I could.
The only baseball player ever named Canada's top overall athlete twice. Joey Votto is hanging him up. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Buffalo.
And Eric will have an extended version of his conversation with Joey Votto that's coming up on Global National this Saturday. And that is Global National for this Thursday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Wascana Creek near Lumsden, Saskatchewan. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.